So we're going to assume you've seen the film.
It's a good start.
Yes, there will be spoilers today. But let's jump in. So everyone who's seen the film or is a fan of Jordan Peele, you know that there's tension, layers, and meaning in all of his work. He's established really quickly his own space for telling these kinds of stories. So Leon, I'll start with you. Can you tell us what it was like? You got involved so early. What's it like to get the call to have that type of collaboration with Jordan Peele?
Yeah. It's always great when we get to be there so early. When we get a call with a director who's really, this is an idea that I have. I don't have a visual solution for it yet, and that's why I'm asking you guys to look into this. For us, it's the ideal solution because that's when we get to, play with the story and play with. We're here to elevate whatever the director wants to say with visuals, and so it is the best configuration. We're coming, it's a blank slate. We don't have a legacy with, let's say, a franchise, or we don't have, previous artwork that has been already done that we have to conform to. So it's very exciting for us at that point. Yeah.
Awesome. And probably in every director's brief, there's the request that you show them something they've never seen before. That's like every brief you get. And really what Jordan did with this film is he created a new lore for UFOs, which must have been a daunting task, but also exciting.
Well, exactly. It's exactly that. It's funny because he didn't say that. He didn't give us that phrase like do something that we haven't seen before. It just had points and pointers of things that he was trying to establish in its story, which was the law for UFO to say, okay, we're gonna try to sell to the audience that there's those UFOs and that we're all familiar with. There is so many movies that mention those, and the whole point for him was to say, okay, that's our starting point, but effectively, this is not a UFO, this is a creature, and I need you guys to help me with, at some point in the movie, reveal that and to show that creature. And for us, that was the very beginning of the thinking process, was just this. So it wasn't really saying, we want to see something that hasn't been done before. It was to say, well, this is what I'm trying to hit, and effectively, we're subversing a cliche, a movie cliche, and just that idea was, never really done before. So it naturally, for us, it wasn't trying to hit something that was strange or weird. If anything, Jordan was saying, let's reference, nature. Let's make sure that out of the bat, we're not going for like designing an alien or anything like that. Let's try to keep it grounded for a while. And so, starting from that flying saucer shape, going to a creature, how does that work? And I think for us, this is kind of how we tackle the process. Quite often when you design a creature, there's going to be some sort of transformation. It happens in a lot of movies, and you kind of say, okay, what is the final design? What does that creature look like? And then you kind of reverse engineer transformations and so on. And the way we designed Jean Jacket was the transformation was the design, because it was so important in the story that we took that shell, that saucer shape, and we can talk some more about that in terms of how do we end up with that shape specifically. But we took that saucer shape and was like, how do you open that can? What happened when you start pulling it apart? Like, where does it go? And so that was kind of the beginning of the process and how naturally we were starting to do those transformation design more than trying to design a creature. Um, and then lastly, on that point, something that was very interesting that Jordan had in his mind very early was the idea of origami. And it's something that he put forward in the conversation saying, well, imagine that it's like folding paper. Imagine that this is something, how do you get something so small and you expand it into something so big? And we briefly talked about that idea of origami, and that's also something that fed a lot of our versions and a lot of our research. And something we do very early in those types of projects is we do mood boards. And for me, origami is, we did a mood board of that right away because that was a very interesting idea, but we needed to make sure that we were talking about the same thing. So we had a mood board of, folding papers, origami, and lots of the type of, art that you can see with folding paper, just to put it in front of him and say, okay, what does that look like? Is it appealing for you? Do you think that's what? And for him, straight away was like, oh yeah, that sounds kind of cool. So we knew, okay, this is a direction we need to dig into, which we did eventually.
And when you talk about grounded design, I recall you saying, you said like remove the idea of like magic or something that is otherworldly. You wanted it to be like something that could have existed in this world for a very long time.
Yeah, indeed. And we can start here looking at a few things here and there. Let me see if that works. It does work. Oh, good. Um, yeah, well, we do that anyway. We started the very early on process for Jean Jacket was to look at animals. So we look at like deep sea creatures. We look at a lot of those things, and we reference a lot of deep sea creature at the beginning. Eventually, we moved away from this for some very clear story purpose. But if we start looking at those, for example, this was very clearly referencing. This is the day the Earth stood still. Um, this is the Forbidden Planet, and we were kind of getting those very iconic saucer shape. And Ivan did a lot of work with putting them into skies, hiding in the clouds. How does the silhouette read? Do we like that shape? Is it too standard? And so we played a lot with those ideas until we talked about the sun dollar. And that's when, again, referencing nature, and that's when Jordan was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's it. It makes sense. And at that point, we went really to that idea of referencing animals and getting a more organic overall shape, which you can see kind of here. That was Ivan's test of like the idea of Jean Jacket picking out, like stalking in the clouds. And very simple, just is that silhouette working? Do we like it? And that was kind of the idea. Um, Other thing we can talk about briefly as well, Evangelion, which is something that Jordan came very early, he talked about this. And what's interesting about this, and it goes with the idea of our transformation, is that for the angels, they are very functional. So what you see in the movie, what they do, the shape they have has just a sole purpose of what is their action in the sequence. And what Jordan wanted was that same idea, like just keep it simple. We don't need something that's crazy, something that has this over detail. It's just, it has to transform. And so the look of it is going to depend on that. That was the very early research in terms of shapes. Farid, do you want to talk about a little bit about those?
Yeah, sure. So basically, at this point, looking into a traditional saucer, there was the notion of light, and it was something that we really had to explore and kind of exhaust. It was very much what is a traditional saucer do? How does it swallow horses? How does it chase the horses? And basically, how is it a shepherd? And so the obvious answer was definitely light because that's what we're all familiar with when it comes to the traditional view of aliens. And I think this is just one of those situations where you go through what's expected to then maybe later realize that, oh, this is not the answer for the story. So we went through this for a while, and you'll see throughout the slides that the notion of like took a while before we discarded it. It actually was quite present again because I think it was the most obvious solution to how do you bring the horses, how do you attract the horses to the creature. So yeah, these are some of the explorations that we did. Um, and yeah, this is kind of where we started to merge the shape with light. And do you want to talk about this one, Leon?
Yeah, there's two things that Jordan was looking at the beginning and that we were helping him figure out. One was, okay, so if we're saying that, we're playing with the notion of light, like you see, Encounter of the Third Type and like all those things, right? There is light in the spaceship. How does that work? Is it that we're actually talking bioluminescence? Is it something like is the creature, as it's breathing, is opening some vents and you see the light from the inside, but from far away, it just looks like a spaceship with lights? So this one was meant for that, the idea of, just some vents opening on the creature. Um, The other thing as well that he was trying to say is maybe the other option would be it reflects the moonlight. So there's that idea that every time you would see the moon in the shot, the creature could come in and use that to kind of reflect it on the ground to kind of lure the horses to eventually catch them up. And we did a lot of those kind of ideas with lights. Even here, so this is already a bit more of an advanced concept that you see here, but the idea there was the caustics on the ground, and he wanted to play with the idea that the creature could unfold and then use, become a lens through which the light would go through and then just cast, lighting effect on the ground. So for a while, this one was another one as well. How does the creature harness the light? And you can see all of those are very quick sketches. It's really just to help him, okay, would that work for your movie? Does that make sense? Or it just doesn't. And eventually, we kind of moved away a little bit from the idea of the lighting for a lot of different reasons, because mainly there was that idea of the creature has to fly, has to sail the wind, and there were much less space for that big lens or that idea of harnessing the light, because now we needed something together to float. So, that changed. And to that point, actually, we're talking about what Jordan wanted and then, him changing idea. And there's something very important here is that at that point, he's writing a script. So all those images that you see there, it's, us doing some concept, him getting those and like, oh, okay, great. I have some ideas. Going back a week later with a new version. And then, it was a constant back and forth. And that's why for us it's so fun, because you're really helping him figure things out. It's not a simple service of this happened in the story, can you paint it? It was really just figuring that out.
Because there's implications, right?
Yeah.
In the smallest shift in what you're
Yeah,
producing for him. So you're developing this visual language with the director as early as
yeah,
possible, which is the ideal, right?
yeah. No, 100%. There is lots of things in terms of directionality, like can we understand the direction the saucer is going to, or is there a notion of the saucer is looking at you? Do we need something in her anatomy that the viewer can understand which way that saucer is looking at, for example? And I know there is some tests that were done in Previs as well, so we can talk about that. Yeah, this is Dust Devils. Ivan, there was some of your versions. You did quite a few of those. Just the idea like how does Jean Jacket eat? And very quickly we landed on the idea that it just creates a dust devil and it's just suck the thing right off the ground, which is used a lot to great effect in the movie. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Um, I can go through those. So this is very interesting as well. So this is giving you an idea of our very early versions and things that way different to what's in the movie. Talking about the transformations, right? So that's something like that. We had, this was just an early idea of an, clearly an eye looking at you.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
In all of these, and you can continue to go through, but I think where you landed was something so beautiful. And I think that's what part of the jaw-dropping surprise was at the end and the transformation, that it was actually very beautiful. And you can see the characters being impacted almost by their fear meets being drawn to that beautiful space. So what was the conversation around the threat juxtaposed against the beauty that was unfolding as well?
Yeah, yeah. It's actually very interesting because that evolved quite a lot. At the beginning, it was that idea that Jean Jacket is more like a godlike presence, and it's just something that opens in the sky that the fear comes from like the sheer size of it, but that was mostly the idea at very early on. And so it's that moment, yeah, like it's a godly presence and you're just looking at it and it's inspiring and it's beautiful and it has a certain, if it wasn't that big and that impressive, it would just just be that beautiful. But as the script was progressing, definitely it took that more like a horror movie turn, that darker turn, where at that point we had to introduce horror into Jean Jacket. A lot of those research came through eating and how does the creature eat, and we did a lot of those for a while. And eventually, same thing. I was just trying to help Jordan figure out, okay, like how much do we see as well of the creature eating, and eventually put a spin on it, on what you know. That's how you start the movie. You're inside the creature, and you just get to see right away what's happening in with, even though we don't quite understand it. He started the movie like that.
Well, that's
Um,
something else I was wondering too, is I'm glad you called it by its name, Jean Jacket. Um, at what point in the process, and this is for Yvonne or Fareed, if you want to jump in as well, at what point did you feel like you knew who Jean Jacket was? When did that character become and Jordan said, okay, we have it now, and now we can just continue to iterate on this.
It was pretty early on. It was that image actually, and we presented a bunch of the images that you saw earlier, where it looked like a more organic creature and things like that. And when he saw that, he was like, "Oh, that's it! Like it's the origami, it's the unfolding, it's this is solving this super tight, massive volume and how it can expand. Like this is solving. It was hitting every box that was necessary for the story."
Freed, you recently told me a story that blew my mind as far as you were going one route with tentacles and it shifted pretty quickly. Do you
Yes.
want to tell how that happened?
Yeah, well, I'll mention two stories real quick. One is the way if you can go back and to one before, where this one. I think this is very much the creature for a while, and then Jordan saw one of the previous concepts where you saw kind of the light going through it, and he asked us, "Could you open this creature? Like this is, let's say that the top part, what I'm gonna call the head, opens." Um, and so that was one of those situations where we were working with one creature for a while, and then because of another concept, we merged them, and it brought us into this place. And now to answer your question, Katie, uh, we were working for a really long time with tentacles. It was just like the creaturey aspect of it, and very very close to the end, in one of those like long nights, he came to us and he was like, "Hey, I think I want to do a skirt." And we're like, "What?" But you've been working with tentacles for a long. No, no, I want a skirt because I need this creature to float. And there's this metaphor that I like playing with, which is Marilyn Monroe and how she died because of the press and people filming her and stuff. So this is my Marilyn Monroe, basically. So it was just really hard for us to do that like harsh turn. But I think in the end, it's really cool to see how he had a vision that ended up working beautifully.
And then there's the practicality of the time frame you were in. Uh, as one who runs the studio, it's like you got to get it out, get it out.
I think it's one of those, yeah, it's exactly like studio presentation, and being like, okay, we need one more thing. What is it that we need? And that was the skirt. And I actually think this was a haha moment, because when he saw this one, he said classic. And I think for him, that's when, before that, he was still searching for something, and seeing the skirt, that was it. He was sure now that, and it made sense because of it just works with the idea of the flying. For a long time, we had all those ideas of she's carrying around a microclimate. So whenever, under her, you would always have that notion of like storm, and everything would be, wet, and like she's harnessing the light. So there is that heat that is constantly there. And when we got the skirt working, and the idea of just the gliding already, which is what, finalized the shape, everything else was, we stopped really looking for anything. That was kind of it. Yeah.
And of course, the skies and the clouds have such a relationship with everything that's happening with Jean Jacket. So, Yvonne, I was wondering if you'd like to talk a little bit about this ecosystem surrounding Jean Jacket and what was the conversation there and your process working on that.
Yeah. So we initially started working on Jean Jacket's home cloud. So this cloud that should stay the same throughout the film, and we explored different shape, different ways of integrated in the sky. So um, i- the goal was to make it look like you can see it right away, but for example, if you watch the movie second time, you realize that it always was there. So yeah, we kind of presented Jordan with many versions um, o- of this of the home cloud and its integration in the environment. So that was kind of the first part of the work, and then we received location photos from Santa Clarita, and with different directions, POV shots, and we basically did sky scripting, where we had these location photos and scenes from the film, and we were replacing skies in those shots with according to time of the day, different mood, or even or weather conditions. So basically everything to illustrate to serve the story, yeah, like everything to illustrate how it's going to look in the final film. So yeah, that was a lot of collaboration with the director. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it just shows how thorough the script was written, because at that point it was really just like you're saying, Ivan, it was a sky script. So he was thinking about his story and how the sky would look like for every scene, and how you can, create intensity, calm, and all those moods throughout the sky, which, you might have seen are all they're all CG, full CG. And that was a big element for Jordan, was to control the skies. And again, Patrick, you will be able to talk more about that.
Yeah, because once you get those key designs in place, that's when it's time to apply motion, right? And so I'm not sure what everyone's expertise might be here in terms of understanding previs. So tell us a little bit about that.
Uh, so I'll start with saying that basically when these guys, they made it super challenging for us, right? So they have all these beautiful pieces of work that we need to now create and breathe life into the 3D aspect world, right? What does this volume look like if you start to expand it out into the third dimension? So we have a team that comes on, our team comes on early in the asset build mode. We build out the environment here. We'll build out the vehicle, the entity, all the locations, the characters, horses, anything and everything that's kind of creates that sandbox of ideas, right? And then what this does is it gives Jordan that playground, that sandbox to sit there and start to design his movie, right? He has a script, he has storyboards, and then we start to just get in there and explore camera language, and we can lens our set instead of driving out an entire crew driving out to Santa Clarita every weekend. We can just sit there as a team with VFX, the DP, and Jordan as well, and just explore these different locations. What does the home cloud look like from this spot? What does it look like from over here? And really start to hone in things like scale and scope. It's one thing to see it in the 2D image, but what if you start to, in relation to OJ, how does it look if you start to just place those objects in there in relation to an actual real world camera? The idea of previs, when you start to get into sequence design, is really starting to give almost a rudimentary look, a rough draft, if you will, of what the film will be, kind of through a video game level render, if you will.
Yeah, one thing I want to add to that is it was kind of one of our limitation on our side in 2D. I mean, we did, a few 3D maquettes just to as a proof of concept, but very quickly Jordan was kind of like, "Oh, it should be bigger. Can you make it bigger?" And so we would show it, against like the ranch and things, and it's not that evocative. It's hard to kind of understand. You need to look at it through a camera at that point, right? And so
Right.
for us, we are like, I mean, that's it. That's the end of the road. We need to go previs now.
Yeah, and so there's always this back and forth conversation with this from our department to our department, um, where we're figuring that out, right? Is like, okay, that you can keep blowing the scale up and you have a nice wedge test of like small, medium, large for the entity. What does it look like if it now works within a sequence? So we'll go through the pre-visualization, or previs for short, is where we'll start to take those storyboards and really start to hone in on that sequence. And we'll start to finish, we'll run through a sequence and get a first pass in front of them and say, like, is this what you're thinking about? There's a back and forth conversation there. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be better if it was a little bit bigger, or more of the cat and mouse game in the sky? I want it to feel a little bit more predatory, where it's kind of jumping from cloud to cloud. Figuring out, like you said earlier, is figuring out how does it see, and what is it? How does it look down on the world? Ultimately landed on looking through the hole in the bottom, is like that's kind of the eye, right? Which affects flight path and flight design. So we really start to get into animation test and movement test. What's the like undulating breathing cycle on it when it's unfurled? It's all that stuff that they want to kind of figure out ahead of time, so that when they go to set, they have this almost digital blueprint that they can walk on set with. We know kind of all the puzzle pieces that we're working with to put it all back together on the back end and hopefully make more efficient shoot days. There's still so much room for creativity on the day of when we get out there and like, oh, we need this shot to be really cool. Yeah, that's
I'm trying to remember on this project, was there pitch back and forth between the departments? Were there times where it routed back to you, Leon, in terms of when they had started production? Did you have to get back in again and do some redesign?
We did a little bit. We explored some options for the mouth of the creature. One thing that was such a great move that we cannot claim for ourselves was the mouth, the square pulsating mouth in the movie. Very late in the game, Jordan felt like they were missing some interaction, something that we can just look at and just relate to. So they had that idea of the peacock type moment. So that came very late, and this is it is not something we worked on, but that was a great, great, iconic moment, I think.
Now you just said peacock moment, like we all know what that is. Say more about that.
Oh no, I like it's just clearly that it's a display, right? So that's really what Jean Jacket's doing at that point, and you get to experience the transformation. You've got the stalking, you got all of this, but she's hard to grasp. There's something untangential about her, and so having that display was important to it brings something else, I think, to the character of Jean Jacket. And that stems out from, I think, just having your movie well advanced and realize that okay, we're missing something.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we're talking a lot about that design because that was your award-winning moment for the film, for sure. Patrick, your team was involved all the way through.
Yep.
So some of the like how the film opened and some of the more tragic elements on the sitcom set and everything, that was your team as well, figuring out uh, how to do those moments as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's we worked on I think over 12 sequences, including the entire final the third act. So it was all encompassing, which was fantastic. I think one of the really important parts about how we were able to help service the filmmakers out there, a lot of the reason behind this previs is to give everyone, when they sit around, the heads of departments can look at it and say like, oh, the camera department can weigh in, figure out how are we actually going to film this on set. And I think one of the major technical aspects that was super helpful was, imagine if you're going out to this ranch and you have to tell your camera department, you just film up in the sky and we're going to fill it in later. Well, you want to know exactly kind of where to pan and tilt the camera, which can be super challenging if there's no tennis ball on a stick. If you've seen any behind the scenes stuff, you're just kind of aiming it up in the sky and okay, now what am I filming? What we would do is we would take our little animations of the sequences, load it up onto an iPad in an Unreal format, and then you would basically have a virtual camera out there on location. So you could stand side by side. Jordan's right there, VFX is right there, camera department's right there, and it's like, okay, the entity is kind of playing this cat and mouse game, going from this cloud over to this cloud. So if you hold it here for kind of 8 seconds and then pan 30 degrees over here, we'll get the shot that we're looking for, which was absolutely instrumental in making sure that we could deliver what felt like grounded photography when we had to replace everything in CG that was above the cloud line there.
And that's what's super exciting about that accessible use of virtual production tools, because I think a lot of times at MPC, you might know um, the our studio is responsible for films like The Lion King that looks more photoreal. Jungle Book was an award-winning film for us, and not every application for virtual production needs to be to that scale. And
Yeah.
that's something we talk with our filmmakers a lot about is you're using those VP tools every day. You certainly
Obviously,
did
yeah.
on this film
Yeah.
where you can just load up that 3D environment, literally go out with the DP and the director out into a parking lot and they can sort of play with timing and play with
And scale and scope.
scale,
I
yeah.
think that's such a big thing too, because when it unfurls, how big is that, right? If your camera department's just reliant on capturing an over the shoulder shot, looking out into the horizon, do we need to lengthen this lens? And with that iPad, you can click the lenses up oh, let's throw it up to a 35, let's kick it up to a 50, and then you can really start to see in real time, oh, this framing is so much better if we shoot it this way, as opposed to the expensive method of trying to fix that in post, which has been a challenge for the industry for the longest time, right? So we're providing these almost garage band tools that are out of the box that you can go out there and film on location with. So and I think the important aspect is the carrying of that idea, right? And what's more precious than a creative idea, especially in filmmaking, going from intent, sitting down with what you guys are doing on a daily basis and designing meticulously. You don't want that to slip through the cracks as it goes from each part of the process. So being able to work together hand in hand seamlessly. And then what we're taking is our data that they've captured in post-biz and pushing that into the finals pipe so that that precious idea remains intact throughout the entire pipeline.
I know we want to get into some Q&A soon,
Yeah.
but one last thing I wanted to touch on that I would love to hear from any of you that would like to speak about it is, I mean, your role is essentially to problem solve for the filmmaker, for the creatives, but also you serve the story. Sometimes you serve the story ahead of serving the filmmaker, even because you are helping them to discover things that maybe perhaps they hadn't considered. Um, if you want to just go down the line, Leon, would you like to speak to how you felt like your process was in serving the story with Jordan Peele on this?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's always stories first, for sure. But I think for us, when I was talking about, elevating, it's how can we design a creature or a character or a set that enhance what that story, particularly in that moment in the script, is. So that can be, with that moment of the transformation and making sure that that transformation is going to be, um, beautiful enough to look at in that moment, that the reveal and all that sequence is going to get much more enhanced, right? If you get like something that's just, crappy or basic, and then you get to that moment, that third act, and she transforms, like, there's nothing there. You can put music behind it, you can put a lot, but it's going to be hard to sell. So I think for us, when we approach every design, it's really knowing the script, knowing what they're trying to say as a story, so we can help them. And this is sometimes an issue because we don't always have access to a script, or we have bits of it. And I think we are best when we can really know what the story is about, understanding, the subtext. And Farid talked about the Marilyn Monroe moment, but it's actually kind of important because it tells us a lot how the director sees his movie, the protagonist, and all of this. And having an understanding of that is going to help you to design much better. That's 100%. I don't know, Farid, if you want to.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was very interesting with this project was to go from more to less, right? And so if you can see a lot of these images of, for example, how Jean Jacket was eating, you realize that we were first in this very uh, gruesome kind of tentacle state, very animalistic, very creature-like. And again, because of the story, uh, Jordan was able to realize, hey, like everything you're showing me is cool, but it doesn't serve uh, the the personality of my creature, basically, or like where I want this movie to go through. So this is one of those places where it's really fun to just put out everything that you think this creature could be. Like, for example, this, which is very, very animalistic, very creature-like, and for Jordan to discard them, like that process of discarding images is equally important. So it's not just the hits; it's proposing all the wrong options, and we have to go there. We always go on these really long journeys before Jordan goes back to no. This is the core of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. To that end, there's something interesting is that that very early unfolding that you saw, which was very quickly, our final design, for month on month we tried to simplify it because we had Evangelion in mind. We were trying, okay, can we get it sleeker? Maybe we remove all the details. Maybe the saucer becomes that perfect donut that is so clean. And we've done so many back and forth trying to simplify it, and eventually we just came back to the starting point. But we had to do that because we had to show Jordan, okay, this is all the options you have. Does it serve your story? Does it help you? And I know sometimes that can be frustrating. Some people find it frustrating, like, oh, you work for months and we come back to the starting point. But it's something that happens quite often, and it has to be done because you give your director the understanding that the certainty of what he's trying to say and what is the best option that he has in front of him to tell that story. So that's an important step.
Well, I like Patrick. That's something that I've heard you say pretty often with
Yeah.
previs is that failure is baked into the process,
I was
which
just gonna say that.
I just feel like that could be a bumper sticker,
Yeah.
like for life. It's just like it's baked in. It's perfection is not the goal. The process, the
Absolutely.
journey leads you to the best place for the story.
Yeah, and that's I was actually going to say the exact same thing. Is Katie's such a huge proponent for that too? Is failure is baked into our process, right? We're not going to go out there and knock it out, and maybe we do find, oh, it's version one and we nailed it, but our process is there so that the creative collaborators, the filmmakers can sit there and try the different ideas, right? Get them kind of all. This is the time to pre-bake those ideas. You've got the time and the luxury. It's not expensive. You're not on set. You're not in post trying to figure it out. This is the time to work through that art, get the first couple of sketches out of the way, right? And figure out like, no, this is my film and figuring that out. So it's, while it can be somewhat of a turnoff to people that are just coming into it, they're like, oh my goodness, version 87, but you're figuring it out, right? Like that's part of what our process is for. And to underline what you were talking about, Leon, I encourage and tell all of my artists, you're storytellers first. You're storytellers that just understand animation and camera work and cinematography as well, and you help to inform VFX. But you're a storyteller first. Read the script any chance that you get. It really helps you understand sequence design and approaching motivations for characters, and it helps you set cameras. And there's so much that it helps to inform, as opposed to having a small singular perspective on kind of just this scene, and we're allowed just to read these script pages for that scene. It's so much more informative to know where their heart is and their mindset for their story. Yeah.
Yvonne, did you have anything you wanted to add in terms of story? Or I know sometimes with creatives that you're working with, it's as important to know what's working as it is to know what's not working. Sometimes it might just be like no to this, but then to get more deeply into the conversation about what exactly is their preference.
No, yeah, yeah, completely agree with everything Leon the Farid said, and just constantly giving versions to directors is basically our job for the most of, and notes. Yeah, but it's funny to look at everything and see how things are clicked. Like out of all the artworks that they did, it's funny to see like 3 images, like first keyframe that Jordan liked, like Leonder's like first design that basically stayed the same until the end. Yeah, but there's just a whole sea of variations behind it. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, you have to take the journey for sure.
Yep.
Well, let's open it up to some questions if you have any. Ben, what's the best way to do this? Do you think just raised hands? Okay, great. Hi.
You up to design and then slowly unfurls this crazy huge monster.
That was a very organic process. Actually, I must say for this, we didn't really look at reference. In a sense, we applied the way I designed it was just having that that saucer and just trying to find a way to open it. And I tried a few starting point shapes and then went from there. And it was kind of applying logic, if you will. The only notion was to say, this is folded somehow, and I have to pull things and unfold them. We had that joke for a while that it was like, reversing a sock, and you take that sock and you just pull it out, which is a little bit what it is. But really, it was finding a step that feels logical and beautiful, and then keep going, keep going, keep going. And I think that's why when Farid was saying like eventually ask us to open the sail at the top. We stopped there before because we had kind of no reason in the script to keep going. So we were like, okay, I think that's it. We're there. We've unfolded as much as we could. until the script got us a reason to keep going in a way. But the target, in the back of our mind, when we started to get those tentacles out, we were like, oh, okay, well, we've got a squid now. Let's figure it out. It's kind of close to those deep sea creatures. And that's kind of what kind of stuck for a while until we were like, no, we need to find a way to make it fly and sail and, glide on the wind. But yeah.
Yes. So the question was, how long was the process and how big were the teams?
No, it's all good. I mean, the team is for art anyway. It's right here. So it was just the three of us. Yeah. Which is what you want most of the time, small tag team, really focused. And we worked on it on and off for more than a year, and then it came back around, so we did extra work. But all in all, like the design of the creature was actually, like we said, sorted out pretty quickly, and then it was figuring out all those options. Translucent, how translucent it is, how thin. We, like Farid, did a lot of like translucency on those tentacles. Yeah. But yeah, and then eventually passing the buck to you.
Yeah, it landed in our court, and I would ballpark it. I would say probably an overall estimate is 9 months for our team, but that's a little bit broken up because there's a side of it that's a pre-production, then they go off and shoot, and then when they come back, we pick it up and do some post on that. And that team was probably about 6 people for the entire duration, 9 months, and I think it was roughly around 700 shots that we worked on.
And you all worked on it. You worked on it so long that when it came in the door, we just called it UJP, Untitled Jordan Peele Project. And the project for a long time was just no name UJP. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys could talk about how shooting the dynamics worked on it. I think we could guess what shooting, if there was a
Great question, because typically we're working more in the kind of traditional 239. So framing for sure is a big thing, and certainly working with all of our artists that are helping to compose shots. It's more of your traditional, almost 4:3 style aspect ratio, right? It was a learning curve certainly for a lot of artists, just because we're so used to the 239 bars on there. Um, how do you frame something with that at scale to make it that much more interesting and compelling to look at? It was a challenge for sure. But I think we nailed it overall. Is kind of you pick it up pretty quick. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Let's go way in the back over there. Yeah. Yes, you. Yeah.
when we saw the we talked about when my friend we saw the complete final design of Jean Jacket, right? Probably when, like you said, like a month or a whole year of designing Jean Jacket, and we finally saw it on the movie, it was the final design. Was there an early design of Jean Jacket that you completely fall in love with that you wish that could have first of all,
It's a good question.
Yes, I mean it happens all the time. I think it's we have to kill our babies. It's an inside joke. Sorry that it's so crude, but it is like that, and it's part of the job. And yeah, so there's one actually in there that I actually really liked. Uh, the very evil one. No, there's a very evil version of it, demonic version, and I actually liked it. But this one, right? But just like that, there were like many that I could have said like, oh, I love it, and this should be it. And at the end of the movie, you realize like, oh, Jordan was right. I'm so glad this is not the version.
I read briefly on this. I think the demonic version came at roughly at the same time as the Marilyn Monroe version. And same thing, it was like, okay, what if we just, take the God idea and we just reverse it? And this is just pure evil, and that's what it is. And so he was asking us, can you get something out that really feels like just, yeah, an evil version of Jean Jacket? So that was it, yeah.
They take in the middle right there. In the middle.
That's the background always in the kitchen. Why is it square? How did they see and why did that have color versus the rest of the design was kind of
So yeah, so that's the peacock, right, that I was referring to. Just that display of beauty that just gives us something to focus on the character itself. And like I was saying, this came very late in the game, and I think it's actually having talked to Guillaume, the VFX supervisor on the show, he did that on his laptop. That was like a last minute thing.
Guillaume
Like,
designed it.
yeah,
So
he
green
had to
square.
figure it out. Yeah.
And green was. Did you ever have a conversation about the color?
Yeah, I think it's really clearly referencing peacocks. Yeah, yeah,
And also
and it's iconic. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah,
Jordan's love for Evangelion and like
yeah, the square. I mean, yeah, the square is that really. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, no, no.
well, the idea is that referencing Evangelion and getting. You've got something that's very organic that unfolds like it looks like a sail, it billows in the wind, and then suddenly you get that pulsating square. That comes with the idea of saying, okay, we need to have an eye grabbing on that creature. So you take the polar opposite of everything else. And it's an accent. It's like when you make an image and you need an accent of color, an accent of value, or anything like that. That's exactly what it was for there. Um, I think I'll pass on this one.
Well, that's what we've talked about too, is there when we discussed this panel, I you used the word protective, like you wanted to be a little bit protective of the filmmaker's process because mystery is very important to him. And so we
100%.
probably
Yeah.
all heard, press and podcasts and things when the film came out, and there are just certain things like he would not want to answer. But would he answer those things to you privately so that you could do your designs?
Yeah, so some of it. I think when we started, it was like us. He was figuring things out. I think since the movie is finished, yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably the way he sees it might be different. I'm not sure.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't have any privy information in the eye or the mouth or yeah.
We had a question here.
talk a little bit about like the design of the inside of the jean jacket. Like we only did briefly in the film. Like I know you said you referenced a lot of like museum and stuff. So I was just curious a bit about what the design process for that was like.
It's the inside came for us anyway. It came at the point where he wanted to amp up the horror, and he did it in moments of like just sheer scary, gory things like that. And so the way it came around for us is in our design originally we hadn't really thought about this. And as he was ramping up the horror, that's when he needed the inside. And it's really just the idea for this was where does all the folding go? And so it's just referencing that the inside is referencing those very parametric architecture with all those lines and everything, and that's really what it was about for the inside. Uh, nothing beyond that.
I'm actually curious because like towards the end of the film after Jean Jacket was I guess destroyed in a way. Do you guys concept art of what actually happened to the body? I'm assuming that it's like probably not able to discuss or something. I don't know.
We do not have any of those. We did very in the end we did very little keyframes of scenes for the movie. It was a lot of the some productions we're working on. We do a lot of keyframes. This was much more about designing the creature and then doing all the, I guess you can call them keyframes for the skies, but that was it. So we don't really have scenes of the movie that we've painted in that production.
In the back.
Right. And Jean Jacket, that girl energy. No, technology and the physics of the creatures. And I was just wondering, how often did the physical development team, did you guys collaborate or communicate with experts with these deep sea creatures and mechanics of how, I guess, the physics of the sky, all of that? Was there a lot of communication?
So on our side, you want to answer, Patrick?
You got a couple of things, but yeah, you can go ahead.
I was just about to say for us at the early beginning, it was a lot like Jordan had a lot of conversation with scientists on his side, and then he would report back to us those notes. But yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I felt like he and Guillaume was the VFX supervisor for the show. They would have a lot of those conversations and would kind of just bless us with that information. But what I can add to that is we would certainly have tons of physics conversations, more about the speed of flying saucer, right? Like we didn't want to break the sound barrier, so there was actual physical speed limits that we would have to keep it at, and in these moments where it's a little bit more lurking, we had to keep it within these kind of speed parameters. So there are certain level of conversations of like has to feel grounded in real world physics, and we don't want to break the sound barrier to draw attention, and all of those components kind of go into that conversation.
What one thing I want to add to that is, as a creature designer, even as concept artist, looking at nature is so important, and you have to love it. You have to be a nerd about it, and so you always when you reference an animal, when you discover something new, you would read about it, you would figure it out, and so it's definitely not, even if we're not like specialists, there's a lot of knowledge of the animal kingdom or whatnot that goes into this, and you cannot ignore it, because if you want your design to feel grounded and logical, and you need to reference that 100%.
And it even goes into the animation of just stalking, right? A predator prey stalking, almost like I think Jaws in the sky, right? Like it's the ocean flipped up into the world, but how a tiger might lurk in tall grass before it attacks. There was a lot of reference material being sent back and forth with that, understanding how predator stalks its prey for sure.
Seemed like there was also play with eye contact with the characters and with Jean Jacket. And I don't know if you all had conversations about that in the design, but it definitely was in play.
Do you want to talk about it, find the deal?
About the what? Oh, the other thing. Yeah. So again, we were first playing with the traditional UFO shape. And something that was really important for Jordan was exactly that. How do we realize where these creatures looking? And it was that divot at the very front of it that you can see in the posters. And like I don't know if you guys can see that, but that was the way Jordan wanted us the audience to realize what was happening and what like the directionality of the creature.
We and that's also why eventually we gave up the idea of the donut, because it removes a lot of that directionality, and you can see here, right, that shape still is showing you a sense of direction, where with the donut you were lost, especially because it's so clean. Eventually in the movie we were talking about the idea of like dolphin skin, just something very smooth. And so yeah, if you didn't have those moments of directionality, you wouldn't really understand what was happening.
I saw, do you have a question up here?
The kids that dress up as aliens as like a fake out, was that ever explored at any point of like, traditional aliens compared to Gene Jacker?
The question is, were traditional aliens design ever explored separately from Jean Jacket? Is that right? There's a little bit of a fake out in the beginning with the kids.
Just so I understand, do you mean the design of those costumes, or do you mean that Jean Jacket is an alien?
Did that come from like a previous design, or was that added during the patterns?
Yeah, that was in the early script. There was that idea. Just playing to that note. It's basically playing with the audience there, right? It's like, okay, well, this is UFOs. We even show you, oh no, actually, it's not. It's a joke. Like, it's that moment of like uncertainty of like, what is it? What is it like we're looking at? Yeah,
And a bit
for
of
sure.
play, right? That we've heard of UFOs, we've heard of little green men. What if they were the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? What if it
Mhm.
was one thing?
Yeah.
Right here. We're working on UTP, No, I'm just. That's what we call things instead of you, JP.
Yeah, we're working on quite a few things. We're pretty busy. Nothing we can really talk about right now.
You guys are all
But
looking at me.
it's
Like, what can we
yeah.
say?
No, it's cool. There's good things coming. That's all I can say.
I think we can talk about some things that trailers are out for, new things. Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got, I mean, you've been on The Little Mermaid for
Yeah.
ages upon ages.
Yeah, we designed the mermaids, Ursula, like all those guys for the Little Mermaids. So that's gonna be a good one. We're working a lot with Disney, doing a lot of their projects.
I think it's really
Uh,
interesting what comes to you. The briefs that come to you are so varied and so different. So you might
Yeah.
get, you know, for Little Mermaid, you were sitting down with Colleen Atwood, who is an Academy Award winning costume designer, and literally designing wardrobe for every, you know, every member that you're going to see. And the cast was right here. And in addition to that, you might be asked to come in really early pre-script to do some keyframes that just sort of tell the story in an image or two to show the world. But then in post, you know, maybe not everybody's favorite. You might do some VFX paintovers or other sky
Yeah.
replacement things just to help make decisions, right?
It's just variety in work. Farid, I think you can talk about it. I know you like that, so go for it.
Like that. But
Yeah.
anyway, it was, as Katie was saying, one day we're designing how does Jean Jacket eat. Like that's pretty gruesome. I'm looking at dead horses and blood and like, you know, just trying to satisfy uh, the gore that the movie needs. And then the next day I'm designing a fairy and helping. So that's a big, I think it's one of my favorite parts of the job is having to go through multiple design challenges that are very, very different from each other and still having, you know, the creativity to address them within their own line of work because it's very easy for things to start leaking out, right? Like I love aliens and I love creatures, but I cannot bring that to the fairy world. So it's I don't know, it's my favorite part of the work.
It's challenging for sure because every day you have to bring in a different style, right? You have to be somewhat of an artistic chameleon. You may have camera language and sequence design that's very like Michael Bay oriented, right? And then the other side of that is you got to come in the next day. It's like a garage band if you came in every day and they were playing a different genre of music, and you just got to jump in and be able to jam with them, right? So it's stylistically it can be very challenging, but you have to be up for it.
And I know you can't share details,
Right.
but the trailer has dropped for Transformers, and you've
Yeah.
you dedicated your life to that for quite
Couple of
some
years,
time.
yeah.
So
Start to finish, yeah, but that should be an awesome one. So
we'll do a different panel on
go
that
check it
one.
out.
That. Hey. Any other questions out there?
It was so easy. Is someone who's so there's two things to that. I think first of all, he's very humble. Yeah, you know, he doesn't feel like he has anything to prove. But the other thing is he's very prepared. Like he knows where he's going. He knows what he wants to say. And most of the time, I found when interactions are difficult with a director is because they're a little bit uncertain or antsy, and so they can take a back seat or they cannot give you the answers that you need. And with Jordan, it was definitely a collaboration. He was fully open of what he was trying to accomplish. He wasn't holding back on information, and that's when you do your best work, really. I don't know, Patrick, if you have.
Yeah, and I think from our side, very similar experience. I think previs in general is typically reserved for more higher budget visual effects films, and I think this was kind of his first foray into that with using department like ours. But he's so forward thinking, just immediately gravitated towards it and got it and understood it very quickly. And I think probably with his history in improv was like yes anding everything, right? It's like able to take what we're doing and just like yeah and elevate that by doing this, and was very open to about just being a creative collaborator there with like spitballing ideas and throwing out ideas, and it was all in service to the story, right? Is how can we make it better? How can we make it better every day? So um, it's not that often that you get to have someone that with such a clear vision for that, that you know you're just executing on, and then you can elevate from there. It's so fun.
And a little flex for Leon. You mentioned when he came to your first meeting, he had researched you. so, so he came in having already watched some videos and read some articles. You sort of throw that out the window at the beginning and then those conversations.
I'm trying to remember. To be honest, our producer is not here. She could have talked about it.
But every conversation sort of starts with, "We don't have very much money."
Yeah.
So
For sure, that one.
so it just kind of depends, right? I mean, the ideal putting together the bid, they never tell you. They will never tell you how much they have to spend. And it just depends on how much do they need the information you're going to give them with the work that you're doing. So like, other projects recently worked on, you've spent 5 times what they told you was their limit
It's a challenge, right?
because they need it, right?
And because it's so early on, it is that open sandbox, right? So you're not going into a store and saying, I'm going to buy 3 boxes of cereal. You're like, let's invent some cereal and see where it goes. It's like, it can evolve. So it's hard to put hard and fast numbers. So we have some math
mean,
that does that.
Yeah, it could be hundreds of thousands into millions depending on how much time. I mean, you're just buying experts' time
Right.
and there's a rate for that.
I feel like on Nope, we had moments of like pressure where, studio presentations are coming because that's the moment where, he knows he has to put all the artwork together because he has to show, to the execs and stuff. But overall, it felt like I don't feel like we were rushed on that project. We had the time to, well, luckily, right, we nailed it very quickly, which is rare.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a pretty easy going ride, and then it just fizzled out at the end because that was it. Like we tried so many variations, and then like I was saying, we got to the point where it was like it's becoming hard to figure how big it should be. Like it really, I think it ended up being 10 times bigger than it was supposed to be at the beginning. And I think that's when, for us, we had done what we had to do, and now it needed just sometimes to, just play with cameras and frames. And so it didn't feel like it's not one of those projects where you don't have the time and you're gonna have to figure it out. Not really. It was pretty straightforward.
And sometimes places where films have budgeted in other areas, they'll end up swinging it over if this is the area that helps them solve the issues they want to solve. And if this isn't the area, they might, swing that over to doing something that's more practical on set. But for this one, I mean, a lot of what you were breaking down as far as what was going to happen later in visual effects settled in with your department, which was great.
And I would say as long as that process is successful, they will find that money. It's an easier conversation to have if we need to change scope of work.
Like we saw the different like kind of saucer versions that you developed, and like you were talking about how this one's a lot more, and with the circle build your final design. Did you kind of mean for it to look cowboy bone?
No, we didn't. But I love it. I'm gonna say that from now on.
I just want somebody to Photoshop.
Yeah.
Yeah. That can be someone here can do that.
Yeah.
Over here. Hi.
Hi, kind of a weird question, but what's the texture of jean jacket? I want it's like leather feeling or it's like paper folded. Kind of using this shot, and like when it's folded in, it's like very big.
Well, I guess that's up to you to decide. We definitely explore different skins, as Leand was saying, like dolphin, shark, and we really, you know, when we're working on it, we don't know how much of it Jordan will want to show you. So what you saw is basically the final. He doesn't want to zoom in for him to explain certain things, you know. So what you saw is basically that. Um, it goes back to the paper. It goes back to the origami. It goes back to functionality. But I think the answer is very much what you saw is what you get. We don't know where this creature is necessarily from.
One thing that's interesting on that is there's that idea that you're looking at a saucer, right? So it's a hard shell. And then in the movie, you've got that moment where she comes very close to screen and you see the wind billowing. And that's suddenly that surface that you think is hard surface because it's a saucer, you realize, hang on a second, it's not. And so this was a key moment in that we worked a lot on at the time for figuring out that reveal. And it was meant to be the moment where we understand we don't see it's not the big reveal where we see the creature, but it's that moment that you understand this is not a saucer, it's something else. And so it was meant to be for a while. For in Jordan's mind, it's like he's leaving you sit with that for a while. So you know it's not a saucer, but you don't know what it is. To get you all the way to like the big reveal at the end.
And I have to ask, and I don't expect an answer, but are there more? Did you have conversations about like, are there more?
Oh, I don't know.
You know. Ben. Ben's asking about story iterations and changes.
So for me, that's what was very impressive with working with Jordan and seeing the script evolve is that the way the script is evolving, the big overarching idea and everything is still there. It's just adding onto it. It is adding clarity, is adding drama, is adding character interaction, but everything else he already had in his mind pretty clear. And so, it's not one of those where they're rewriting the third act or they're, like you get some those crazy changes. It was every single thing was kind of built upon very neatly and efficiently, and that was something great to see. So, in terms of the story and all of this, there's actually not that much that changes. It's just clarity on the characters and their involvement in the story, and the horror and things like that. But yeah, that's pretty impressive. Yeah.
How are we for time? Great. Any other?
Someone said DJ could have Dark energy, and I wonder if you notice yourself gendering, saying he or she for the
Yeah.
It's a question
Yeah.
about if they gendered Jean Jacket.
So it's I'm French. In France, we pick our sides. We say, there is every single object is a he or a she. So for me, there's no like it's clear. It's a she. Um, she, very early on in the script, she was maybe carrying babies or not. That was something that we were thinking about.
Oh, wow.
That you can. I don't think we can see in any of those. Which is something that was dropped just because it wasn't really helping the story. So it was not like a story point in particular. It's just something that we were playing with the crest and in the design, but it wasn't bringing anything. So I was like, you know what, doesn't matter. So maybe that's why in my mind I stuck with that idea that it's a she. I don't know what do you think.
No, I have no idea. No, honestly, like just thinking about this creature from Jordan's perspective, I always think it's uh, the things that he's not telling us in the movie are for a reason, and so I I would say I don't know.
Fine, you weigh in.
No, I don't think. No, honestly, I no certain ideas.
Did you have a question? Yeah.
website because I saw like well Gene Decker like I'm nostalgic like final set, but I can also see like the horror of having more of a not more of a
So the question is finding the balance between the horror aspects and the more animal or gentle aspects of Jean Jacket.
I think you're going to be tired of this answer, but it goes back to story. Um, is it distracting, basically? Because we did look at very aggressive aspects of Jean Jacket, right? Like very gruesome and definitely more visceral moments. But when you look at the final movie and what it's supposed to do and the subtleness of the creature, that's how we come up with that balance. This is too much. Now we're entering a different realm. This is a different personality. And you could also be spoiling the end, basically, right? Because it's not until the end that you see that it's more of a creature. Whereas, if you had revealed some of these more animal-like features, maybe the whole story would have felt different, and at the end it would have not been such a big reveal. So that balance really comes back to story.
Yeah, I think in the end the horror is coming from like some set pieces. You've got the moment in the house with the blood coming down. You've got like the chase and the inside. And I think that's where that's the interesting part. You can have your cake and eat it in a way. You can have something that's pretty beautiful, but then you use it for creating horror, and that has even much more impact because of that difference in a way. So yeah, like Farid was saying, I mean, we put some spikes here and there, in the designs and see what, and it wasn't working out, and trial and error. Yeah.